Michigan has very high expectations, and I think people are going to have a lot of revisionist history about Jim Harbaugh. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Zain Bando. That's Will Charlton. And this is another edition of Forever Power 5. You can follow us across social media at FP5 ETB. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMartino, at Will Charlton H13, and Zan at Zain Bando 99. You can watch all Empty to Bench shows on youtube.com/ETB Network. And you can listen to Forever Power 5 wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to like and subscribe. Did I get to the ETV network? Did I say that one?
Yes, you did.
I did. Okay. I'm blacking out a little bit. All right. So, we're starting this off, by the way, just calling a little audible because we didn't plan on talking about this. BYU just won the Pop-Tart Bowl.
In a thrilling game.
Yeah, and they what I love about this game is that it's one of the few bowl games that didn't have any like opt-outs. There were like both teams were at full strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what happened with that last drive, but I think that that throw by Haynes King was a little. I think they were a little bit too reliant trying to get a touchdown on some of those plays on that last drive. I mean, it was third down. They probably should have just tried getting the first down rather than aiming for the end zone.
I agree because they had a timeout left. Yeah, I agree completely. I was talking to Zan about that off recording here.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Their strategy made no sense to me at all. And they had a chance to preserve time with the timeout. It would have given them probably 2 extra plays, maybe even 3 if they played their cards right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was just I thought Georgia Tech really I thought they really just mismanaged the whole thing. They really mismanaged the whole thing. I think Haynes King is a good player, but they're very reliant on him. If he's it's a little bit, and we'll talk about it, but it's a little bit like Alabama with Ty Simpson. They're just so overly reliant on their passing game, and they really, I guess they just can't run the ball effectively. I mean, it's 3rd and 10. They had, I think, one timeout?
Yeah, they have one timeout.
They had one timeout. It's 3rd and 10, and they're passing. They're aiming for the end zone like it's the last play of the game. Mm-hmm. And that's just a low percentage play right there. If they had, even if you run the ball, when you have a timeout, you run the ball, you get a first down, and you get much better field position. It was just, I thought, just I thought it was just terribly mismanaged.
It was.
Yeah, I think
for sure. Probably the worst ending to a bowl game if you're the losing team, at least so far this bowl season, in terms of heartbreak, at least so far.
Yeah.
And I'll say this too. I mean, just like you get that 1st and 10 after that long deep ball that Haynes King hit. I can't remember who the receiver was he hit, but they got down to within the red zone. And then from there, you have a 1st and 10 with I want to say there's 30 seconds left at the time. Guess what? If you just go for the next first down, the clock stops first off. The clock stops, so you have time to get a spike off if you don't want to use the timeout. And then all of a sudden, you're within the 10-yard line. And scoring a touchdown is exponentially easier. So Georgia Tech's offense just really kind of stalled out after the third quarter, really.
Yeah, well, that's kind of how Georgia Tech looked all year.
Yeah.
I mean, look, in a weird way, I think Georgia Tech is actually kind of similar to BYU, which is they're both a little bit of their records are a little bit of a product of their conference, if that makes sense. Like they're both good teams, but like BYU, they're an 11-1 team, but they weren't a very good 11-1. Like they played a very weak Big 12 schedule.
Big 12 only had one really good team this year.
Yeah, Texas Tech.
Yeah, exactly.
And they got killed in that game. Like I didn't
both games.
both games. And their best win was against Utah. I think Utah's a little overrated. And they were fortunate to beat Cincinnati. They were fortunate to beat Colorado. Like BYU, and it's a similar kind of thing with Georgia Tech, except Georgia Tech actually lost a couple of games. Their schedule was a little bit tougher. Like of all the teams in the ACC, Georgia Tech probably played one of the tougher schedules, I would say. But people forget, for a while, Georgia Tech was one of the favorites to win the ACC.
Oh yeah,
for
after
a
they
while.
beat Clemson. Oh yeah, I mean when they were 8-0, people were like, "Well, this is their conference. This is their conference to lose."
Yeah, it's crazy how like almost all the teams in the ACC, like all the top teams, almost none of them even played each other.
Yeah,
it's very strange. Agreed.
That's the problem with these super conferences. And like even if you like have a good mechanism, which you can have for like scheduling. I mean, unfortunately, most of it is totally random, but even if you make it better with these super conferences, it's just almost impossible to actually, like if you have 18 teams in a conference and you play 8 conference games, you're playing less than half of your conference. Like it's completely ridiculous. I mean, the ACC needs to add a 9th conference game because this is just getting ridiculous.
Well, they are for some teams next year. Did you guys see that like model that like half the conference is playing 9 games next year, half is playing 8? Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
So the ACC made scheduling changes that like it's like what is it? So there's 16 teams in the ACC, right? So there's is it 16 in the ACC?
As far as I remember, yeah.
Yeah. So like 9 or 10 are playing 9 games next year, and like 5 or 6 or 6 or 7, something like that, are playing 8. It's so weird.
Yeah,
it makes no sense how they decided to have some teams just play 8 games and some teams play 9. It makes no sense.
Doesn't make sense at all. No.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know about it. How was that fair?
Exactly. I have no idea.
I didn't realize that. Okay, so ACC shares 9 conference schedule in transition year. 12 of its 17 schools will play 9 conference games, with Clemson, Georgia Tech, Florida State, North Carolina, and Boston College playing just 8. Those 5 teams each have multiple Power 4 opponents already scheduled outside the conference. But like that's completely unfair because those non-conference games don't count for the ACC.
Exactly.
And especially in the world of automatic bids, how is that fair at all?
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is if let's say like a team goes 8-1 and then like Clemson goes 7-1, for instance, like which team would hypothetically make the championship game?
The team that goes 8-1, they have the better.
Like who would get the nod there?
I have no idea.
Obviously, the team that goes 8-1 because they have the better record.
That's what I'm saying. So that's why it makes
completely unfair because they're playing an extra conference game.
Yeah, it's
a similar thing this year where Virginia lost to NC State, but it technically didn't count because it counted as a non-conference game because they scheduled them themselves.
Which is just so weird.
Yeah, I don't understand.
Virginia shouldn't even made the ACC championship because of that. They shouldn't have.
Also, why those teams in particular? Clemson is typically one of the I could see them on some level having it so that like maybe all the top tier teams play 9 games, and then I mean I wouldn't support this, but like I could see on some level them saying, okay, all the top teams play 9 games, these more bottom teams, they play 8 games, whatever. But it's like Clemson is always going to be one of the favorites coming out of the ACC. Even next year, they're going to be one of the favorites.
Sure. 100%.
Other than maybe Miami, which who knows? We don't even really know. But if you were to look at the betting odds, like next year, I guarantee you Clemson will be somewhere near the top when it comes to coming out of the ACC. And probably. Florida State, maybe not Florida State because we don't really know what to think about them. But like, I don't understand. And Georgia Tech possibly too, based on how they were this year. How is that fair at all? That's just completely absurd. The only solution I could think of is maybe if one of them plays Notre Dame, you just count Notre Dame as an ACC game. That's the only solution I could think of.
Which, knowing how convoluted that whole thing is, they probably won't even do that.
Yeah, seriously.
No, I mean they're basically a de facto ACC team at this point. All right, I want to get into Michigan hiring Kyle Whittingham. I think this is a really, really good hire by Michigan. Kyle Whittingham did a phenomenal job at Utah. He was there for about 20 years. If you can stay at a major program, I think he was there, if I'm not mistaken, he was there since 2005.
0405, yeah, 0405. 21 years at Utah.
Yeah, 2005 he was there. And that's, look, if you can last, any coach who can last at a major program for
not
20
just
years.
Not just 21 years, but 21 years, 177 wins, and 11 bowl game appearances.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, 11 wins in 16 bowl game appearances.
I was going to say 11 bowl game appearances isn't that impressive in 20 years, but yeah, 16 bowl game appearances.
11 wins, 11 and 6 overall, I think is what it was. But yeah, very, very impressive hire. And one of those where it was just a matter of when he was going to get to step up to a bigger job. And I don't know. I think it's a very unique hire. I think he's getting money that's very, very well deserved. And you want to talk about a guy with stability, pretty much as long as he wins 8, 9, 10 games a year, he was stable at Utah. I don't know what's going to cut it at Michigan, but he's certainly going to bring in a culture that Michigan hasn't had in a long time. I'll say that.
The interesting thing is, I think he might be a good fit at Michigan, largely because he's a defensive-minded head coach, and Michigan tends to like defensive-minded head coaches. They also historically, Michigan's a weird. What's that?
Beside Harbaugh, obviously.
Yeah, although he's not really. He's one of those coaches. He's like Pete Carroll. He's not really a defensive or offensive-minded head coach exactly. But I will say every Harbaugh Michigan team has been a sort of ground and pound defensive minded team. Like all those Harbaugh teams were known for their defense and their run game.
That's true.
And that's what almost every Michigan team is kind of known for. Or at least every good Michigan team is known for that. All the bad Michigan teams were like, at least in my lifetime, it's always been like that.
Right.
We've also seen like Michigan's a weird program because they're not a program like Ohio State or Alabama that really gets it right. Like they're very hit or miss with their coaching hires, historically at least. Like they were good with like Harbaugh was a good hire. Sharon Moore, I think, was a fairly good hire. But years before that, they made some really, really bad hires like Rich Rod and Brady Hoke. Like they've had some really, really bad coaches.
Yeah, essentially after Lloyd Carr left, they really went through a rough patch where they just couldn't figure it out, and they were falling behind very quickly until Harbaugh came in and fixed everything, even though it took him 3 extra years longer than it should have. But that's a different story. But yeah.
Look, I mean. Now, the interesting thing is going to be that, well, one thing that people are talking, and by the way, part of the reason, like I said, I think he could be a good fit there is because of him being a defensive-minded head coach, which tends to fit Michigan's identity. I'm not saying it's a given that Michigan has to be like that every year, but that's always just how they are. Really good defense, really good run game. The interesting thing about Kyle Whittingham is that he's been at Utah since before any of us were born. He's been at least he started in 1994 as the defensive line coach at Utah, and then in 95 became like the defensive coordinator. So he's been at Utah for more than 30 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And before that was at Idaho State. So he doesn't even really – I guess my only concern is like he's been at the same exact place for 30 years. How can he adjust to not only a brand new school, but a whole totally new conference and competing and recruiting in Pac-12 country, which Utah used to be in the Pac-12 until recently, is very different than doing it in the Big Ten. Like they are very different games. Now, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it just because he's used to doing it in one conference doesn't mean he can't do it in another. I mean, Kalen DeBoer was a northern head coach and then went to the South, and things are working out pretty well at Alabama. So, it's not a given that he can't transfer that skill set over. I don't want to overcomplicate it. I do think it's a little bit of a concern, though. I mean, this is a guy who's been there for 30 years. But at the same time, Michigan didn't really have any other choice. Like, who else were they going to hire?
Right.
I will say this too, like, this is such an interesting situation how this kind of played out, because Kyle Whittingham, like, essentially retired from Utah. Like, he stepped down. Like, he was done. He was done.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the Michigan donors be like, hey, we got a little bit of this for you. So I will say this, like, is it a fantastic hire on paper? Absolutely it is. I mean, he's proven himself to be a great coach. He's proven himself that he can win. He's taken Utah to multiple Rose Bowls. But here's the thing I have to say about it. I'm going to be very interested to see how he can come in and take over this role at Michigan, because obviously, like Zain was saying, at Utah, like, you win 8, 9, maybe 10 games in a year. Oh, you're going to be the coach of Utah for as long as you want to be the coach of Utah for. Yeah. If you're only winning like 8 games a year, I feel like that won't put you on the hot seat at Michigan, but people are going to start questioning your job a little bit, because Michigan, after winning that national championship a couple of years ago, they have real lofty expectations now. And they knew that this kind of Sharon Moore process was essentially not a rebuild, but kind of like a refigure out like what's going on with your program type of deal after like the scandal with the stealing signs and stuff. So I'm going to be really interested to see how Whittingham comes in and like you were talking about, Nick, recruiting wise, and what he's able to do in terms of bringing guys in, and how he's able to shift his culture from, playing in the Pac-12 and Big 12 to now playing in the Big 10. I feel there's going to be a couple of years where Michigan's not in the upper echelon, so to say. Like, they're going to be like right there, but not like in that level of the Big 10. But I feel like after a couple of years, once he really figures it out, that's when Michigan might start really getting back to where they are used to being.
Yeah. So I don't mean to interrupt, but I have to ask you guys this question. Now that Kyle Whittingham is in place, how are you guys feeling on the Bryce Underwood confidence meter? Do you think he stays at Michigan, or do you think he leaves? What do you think?
I don't know, but I think I could see him staying.
I could too.
I think I could see him staying, but I don't know, because I don't really have any information to suggest that he's going to leave or that he's going to stay. So I can't really say.
I think he'll stay. I mean, he's from the Detroit area, isn't he? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
he was the best player he was the best player in the state out of high school.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the best players in the country, period.
So I mean, he's basically right from Ann Arbor, essentially. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, so yeah, I see him staying. I mean, I think that obviously, like, if they hired some, I don't know, like if they took the coach they took some G5 coach, like, he's probably not going to stay. But now they have a guy that's proven himself and actually can show like there's a winning culture. Like, yeah, I think he'll stay.
Yeah, I think so. But I was just curious to get your guys' confidence meter on it, because social media has been buzzing the last 72 hours whether he's going to stay or go or not.
Well, look, that's true no matter who you hire.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would say of everybody available, Kyle Whittingham makes it the most likely that he would stay.
Oh, yeah.
The most likely.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, sure, maybe keeping even if Sharon Moore was still the head coach, there's a good chance he bounces anyway. So you never really know with all of that because of the transfer.
No, you don't.
And look, we could be saying this right now, but then all of a sudden some SEC school will be like, hey, we'll pay you $6 million a year to come play for. I don't know what he's making at Michigan, but.
Well, here's the thing, though. Michigan probably has more money than most SEC schools do, than maybe Vanderbilt.
Probably true, yeah. That's a good point.
I mean, that's
a good point, because, yeah, the Big Ten donors seem to have more money, which is kind of.
Big Ten donors, of all the conferences, Big Ten donors probably have the most money.
I know, which is pretty interesting.
Which is why, but the thing with Michigan is that in Michigan, you're right. Michigan has very high expectations, and I think people are going to have a lot of revisionist history about Jim Harbaugh, because everybody remembers Jim Harbaugh and for being like the guy who beat Ohio State and won the national championship. But people also are going to forget that Jim Harbaugh had a losing record against Ohio State in his career. And it took him it took him 5-6 years until, in fairness, he lost to them 5 years in a row. Yeah. He lost to them 5 years in a row before he ever actually beat Ohio State.
Yep.
And so that's what we remember about Harbaugh. And, there were a whole bunch of people calling for Harbaugh to be fired, a whole bunch of people calling for Harbaugh to saying Harbaugh is overrated. And I thought all of it was stupid because you can't just take Michigan and compare them to Ohio State. You have to compare Michigan to what they were before. And overnight, Jim Harbaugh turned the program around. I mean, Michigan couldn't even go to bowl games before Harbaugh came around.
They were real bad.
It was really, really bad.
And he had 6 wins in a year before he got there.
Yeah, and if you can just take a program like Michigan was when Harbaugh took over and completely turn it around like that. Like, look, Ryan Day did a good job at Ohio State, but he took over a program that was already riding high. I mean, Jim Harbaugh wasn't riding any wave. So,
no, he wasn't.
And I think people kind of forgot that, and people now are forgetting that about Harbaugh. But I think that people are going to – but, like, the first time Michigan – like, let's say they lose to Ohio State winning next year. People are going to be like, oh, Kyle Whittingham lost to Ohio State. This is a really these are not Michigan standards. And I just think I understand that you have to beat Ohio State, but – look, how many Michigan coaches have winning records against Ohio State? Like, almost none of them do, including Jim Harbaugh, who's like this Michigan gold standard. So I think there's going to be a lot of sort of like revisionist history about the history of the program and old coaches.
Yeah.
And another thing with Michigan is that, look, the Big Ten tends to be a really shallow conference. Like, there's a few really good teams up the top, and then the difference between 4 and 5 or 5 and 6 or something like that in the conference is really, really big. So they're going to have increased competition. I mean, look, USC is probably going to get a lot better next year. Oregon's not going anywhere. Penn State is probably going to get better next year.
Yeah.
Ohio State is probably maybe not going to be better, but they're still going to be up there. So look, Michigan's competition is not getting any easier.
No, it's not.
Now Indiana's all of a sudden a perennial.
I forgot, obviously, Indiana.
So yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to see what Whittingham can come in and do right away, because like there's going to be Michigan and Penn State will be the two biggest teams to see how they look in year one on these coaches for sure.
Yeah, and and by the way, Washington might end up being. You never know. With
you can always count Washington in for at least 8 wins. I feel like you always count.
And some years, I mean, they kind of had a down year this year. They had a few bad losses, but like, you never know with Washington. So Michigan's schedule is not getting any easier. And another thing people are talking about is his age, which I think is a little. I think it's overplayed a little bit. Because 66 is not that old for a college football coach.
No, I mean, look at how old Cignetti is. Cignetti's 62, and he's going to be there a long time.
Oh,
so,
yeah, exactly.
Pretty damn similar.
I know. I think Kurt Cignetti is older, actually. I think he's like the same. I think he's like 64 or something like that. Yeah, he's 64. He's not that much older than Kurt Cignetti.
Right.
So, college football coaches, they just tend to be older. And honestly, the older coaches tend to do better because they have a lot more experience. And, he can coach for another 10, maybe 15 years if you're lucky. I mean, he's not going to be there as long as he was at Utah, but I don't really think it's that big of a deal.
No, I mean, I don't think so. 5-year contract. So, I mean, yeah, we'll see how he does after these 5 years.
Yeah. All right. Notre Dame and USC not renewing their rivalry. They supposedly will be back in 2030. I think this is just, for lack of a better term, a tragedy.
It is. It
really petty is. Too. It's petty, I think.
I don't know if it's petty as much. Look, I don't know which part it's petty on, but here's the thing. I'm a big believer in rivalries. I want to see all these. Part of the reason I hate conference realignment is the death of rivalries. I don't want to see the death of any rivalries. I want all of these rivalries to continue, and I think it's a damn shame if administrators and ADs are the ones that are just canceling these rivalry games. I want to see all these. This is a great rivalry, Notre Dame and USC. I even want the Notre Dame-Stanford rivalry to continue, even though it's not much of a rivalry anymore because Stanford sucks. But I want to see these rivalries. And with the way these teams are, this is an actual good rivalry. It's not even like it's just tradition. Like, these two teams are actually similar in terms of their competition.
And there's stakes every year, and the games are always close, and there's always some drama at the end. Yeah. 100%. I mean, based on the research that I've done, this seems to be more on USC's administrative side than anything else, because Notre Dame was willing to play the game as long as they did it earlier in the season. So
no, I think it was the opposite. USC was willing to play the game as long as it was week 0.
Oh, right. Got you. Yep. And right. The point I'm trying to make is there was a conflict on both sides, and he just simply, for whatever dumb reason, could not reach a resolution.
Yeah, it's just a shame. And I'll say this, going back to what you're saying about loving rivalries, Nick. I do too. I mean, I think Bedlam is the prime example of, rivalries that got discontinued because of conference realignment. It's a shame that Bedlam, one of the best rivalries out there, isn't being played right now.
Yeah. I also, I totally agree. Though right now it doesn't really matter because, like,
Oklahoma State's awful. Like, but I'm just saying, like, that's an amazing historic rivalry.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. So I really hate that these rivalries are not continuing. Like I said, it's one of the things I hate about conference realignment.
Yeah.
Look, these two teams were never conference. I mean, Notre Dame's never been in a conference, but
no.
My thing with this is that, look, I don't know 100% of the details with this, but
I don't think anybody does. That's the confusing part.
It seems like a lot of people are blaming USC, but it seems like, from my understanding, USC, from my understanding, USC was willing to play this game, but in week 0. So the thing with USC, USC, they apparently they wanted the game to be played in the early weeks of the season when other schools are scheduling non-conference games. I don't understand why Notre Dame wouldn't agree to that, and because they just played Miami and Texas A&M, although Miami is a part. I don't know if Miami can. It's a part of the ACC agreement to play Miami, but they did play Texas A&M, 2 playoff teams, it turns out, in the first 2 weeks of the season. I don't understand why Notre Dame would have such a problem with this. I'm a little bit more on USC's side on this because
they'd rather play the Indianapolis YMCA. I mean,
here's the thing with Notre Dame. Here's the thing, and if you look at the two teams' schedules, USC's schedule is consistently much more difficult now that they're in the Big Ten. Consistently much more difficult than Notre Dame's schedule.
Oh, it still was pretty difficult in the Pac-12 too. I mean,
even in the Pac-12. But look, let me just look at USC's schedule next year.
It's not easy. They have tons of crazy road trips, and their home games are entirely challenging.
Yeah. So if you look at USC's schedule in 2026, they legitimately go on the road to play Indiana. They play at Indiana, at Penn State. They play Ohio State, Oregon, Washington. I don't know if Washington's going to be a good game, but they play all the top teams other than Iowa or the projected top teams, at least 2 of them on the road in the Big Ten. I mean, did you see Notre Dame's schedule next year? It's completely laughable. Now, I know it's not just this one. I understand it's not just this one. This one next season, but like, look, the way I see it is that I think Notre Dame is being a little too stubborn with this. Look, I don't know because I don't know all the details, but that's what it seems like to me, because Notre Dame does not play in a conference, which I'm fine with. But when you create your entire schedule with a little bit of help from other conferences and other teams and rivals, I feel like you need to at least, like, concede a little bit. is how I see it. Like Notre Dame, I do think has an obligation to concede a little bit. And USC plays a gauntlet of a schedule in a lot of these seasons in the Big Ten, much harder than Notre Dame does. I can promise you USC is going to play a much harder schedule consistently for the next 5 years than Notre Dame does. And and I don't think it's totally unfair for USC to say, look, we want to play this game in, the first 1 or 2 weeks of the season, not in the middle of the toughest part of our schedule. I don't really think that's totally unreasonable. Look at Notre Dame's schedule in some of these years. It's a total joke. I mean, this year Notre Dame had one of their tougher schedules, and people criticized them for playing a weak schedule. I didn't really think it was that weak this year compared to other years. But given Notre Dame, they don't play in a conference. Their schedules are consistently weak, and they need help from other teams and the ACC to actually be an independent team with scheduling, because it's hard to schedule every single game by yourself. Like, they have to concede a little bit. Like, I think they're being unreasonable.
And I will say this too about the Big Ten, and Zain will definitely agree with me on this. The Big Ten tends to like to play their non-conference games the first 3 weeks of the season, and then just roll conference play the rest of the time.
They sure do.
There's been certain instances where, there's been a week 2 matchup or a week 1 matchup after a team plays week 0 or something like that, but that's pretty rare. The Big Ten,
it is rare.
Big Ten tends to like to do your first 3 non-cons, and then you play your conference schedule the rest of the 9 weeks. Yep. So Notre Dame is obviously, USC was trying to find a way to make this work, saying hey, we can do week 0, but we can't do our Big Ten gauntlet because weeks 4 through 14 or whatever it is, it's 9 conference games.
Yeah, and it's a contractual obligation, so they can't go off that.
And the thing too about the Big Ten that USC used to not do is USC only used to play 8 conference games in the Pac-12. They play 9 now, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
When did they play 8
in the Pac-12?
How long? But they moved it up to 9 at one point.
Did they?
The Pac-12.
I feel like they always played 8.
No. Maybe it was at one point, but as far as I remember, the Pac-12 always played 9.
I think it was when officially the Pac-12 championship was integrated. Then they switched it. They made it an official conference championship game, like all the other conferences did.
But they were late to do that, weren't they? That wasn't a thing for a while.
Well, the Big 12 for a while didn't have a conference championship.
Yeah, the Big 12 is pretty rare. Big 12 was only 2016 or 2017 they added, I'm pretty sure.
2015 they added it because
that
was the year.
Yeah.
Because that was the year TCU and Baylor both got left out.
That's right.
Right. Yep.
Sure enough.
I'm pretty, as far as I remember, the Pac-12 always played 9 conference games.
Well, forget I said anything then.
I was about to say.
I could have swore the Pac-12 played 8 every year, but forget I said anything then. I guess I don't know.
No, I thought maybe I was misremembering something.
Too funny. It happens, guys.
It
happens.
It happens.
All right. To the playoffs, Cotton Bowl, Miami versus Ohio State. Ohio State is giving 9.5. I don't know if this has actually changed at all.
I've seen Ohio State minus 9.5 across everything.
Okay. All right. So we'll go to you, Will, first.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't think the Buckeyes are going to have many troubles here. Miami, obviously, very impressive win at Texas A&M, but A&M played horrendous. A&M was god-awful in that game. Miami did what they needed to do to get that win on the road, and granted, very good win. The A&M obviously couldn't shake off much rust from that Texas loss because they, like I said, they played terrible. I don't think Ohio State's going to have a chip on their shoulder for actually losing a game. They're going to come in. I think they're going to punch Miami in the mouth. I think this is going to be the most lopsided game of the quarterfinals. I think Ohio State's going to run away with this. It's going to be at least 2 touchdowns, I think, in my opinion. So
I think it's more than that.
I'm taking the Buckeyes all day with that spread. I don't see Miami scoring many points at all in this game. So I see Ohio State winning this 30 to like 28-10, something like that. Maybe it's gonna be a low scoring game. Ohio State's gonna make enough plays to kind of keep increasing that lead. So yeah, give me Ohio State and give me the under in this game.
Nick D, what about you? I'll go last.
You know what? I kind of have mixed feelings about this because look, I think Ohio State is clearly a more talented team than Miami, but look, we've seen points with Ohio State where they've been very flawed, like against Miami, for example, against Indiana, which was their biggest game of the year in the Big Ten championship game. They didn't play terribly, but they also missed out on opportunity. They left a lot of points on the table in that game.
Also,
They sure did.
We're talking about the best team in the country.
Yeah, I know. No, but I'm talking about Ohio State left a lot of points on the table.
Yeah,
in that game. So I do have some concerns with that, and I think Miami has a really, really good defensive line. Probably when it comes to the line of scrimmage, Miami might have an actual advantage over Ohio State. My issue is Ohio State can score a lot of points, and when you get a team that can score a lot, they can definitely cover a big spreads, obviously, much easier. Miami is – look, I think Miami is good, but I think Ohio State covers this number. I'll take Ohio State because I think Miami will give them a game, but it's just so hard for me to imagine a Miami team that will be able to keep up with Ohio State for a full 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that's going to happen.
I agree.
And I just don't think that's going to happen. I mean, the one thing about Carson Beck is that he has a lot more experience than Julian Sayin. But you're right. I mean, part of the reason A&M both teams played so bad is because it was so windy, apparently, in that game.
That's right. It was.
Which is a little weird because, I mean, they're not playing in Chicago. I don't know.
I understand Texas can get really windy.
Apparently it can. Look, I've been to Texas once, so what do I know? But
yeah.
I think that game may have said more about A&M than it did about Miami, and A&M was not in good form. I don't think A&M
didn't. It showed that A&M got exposed because I'm going to use your same argument back on you about A&M. They left a lot of points on the table against Miami themselves. They had a chance to win that game by a couple of scores, and
Miami left a bunch too. I mean, Miami left more points on the board than A&M did.
Yeah, and A&M. I mean, look. When's the last time A&M played a good game? Because, it's been about a month since they played South Carolina and needed a 30-point comeback. Then they lost to Texas. And it's like, if I haven't seen you play a good game in a month, how can I really believe that you're in good form right now? A&M had a good season overall, but A&M does this every year where, they just fall off when it's most important. That was, and I think A&M kind of rode high on a very easy schedule. That's what I think happened. So, But bottom line is, in this game, I still like Ohio State to cover the number. 9.5 is not winning by 2 scores. Ohio State winning that game by 2 scores is not crazy to me.
No, it's not.
So I'm going with Ohio State.
Yeah, I like Ohio State in this game too. I think Ohio State could not have gotten a better draw for its first game in a couple weeks, and I think Jeremiah Smith's trash talks as something. I think he poked the bear at Mario Cristobal, and Mario Cristobal, in my opinion, even though it was a humble comeback, it wasn't a very good comeback. So it's clear that Ohio State is playing with the chip on its shoulder, and it's clear that they're sick of the old Miami of the past. And they're worried about the now. And just to hear Ryan Day reiterate that they've been locked in for 2 weeks and that they want to erase the bad taste and stigma just out of their system, this is going to be a beatdown. Give me Ohio State minus 9.5. And actually, I'm going to disagree with Will. Or I actually think the over has a very good chance of hitting. So I'm going to take Ohio State to cover the number, and I'm going to take the over 42.5 in the Cotton Bowl in Arlington.
All right. So Orange Bowl, Oregon is giving 2.5 against Texas Tech. This game is very interesting to me because Texas Tech very much lived in the Big 12 bubble because they didn't play any like good non-conference games this year. I mean, their best non-conference game was Oregon State. They not a single Power 4 team in the non-conference that they played. Look, they ran through their whole schedule except Arizona State, and that's only because their quarterback got hurt.
Morton was out. Yeah,
Aaron Morton got hurt. So it is interesting to me because like Texas Tech statistically is a very, very good team, but they only like their competition this year wasn't great. And I'm not saying that to like take anything away from them, but Oregon's a totally different story. They played a much tougher schedule than Texas Tech did, a really tough Big Ten schedule. They went through a lot more adversity. They played much more close games. They had to get humbled by losing a game to Indiana. Overall, I think they're probably a better team, a little bit better than Texas Tech, and Vegas agrees that they're a little bit better, give 2.5-point favorites at a neutral site. I think I'm going to go with Oregon here. I really do, because part of it is also they have more experience playing tough games this year. They got humbled last year by getting blown out by a team that ended up getting hot at the right time. Texas Tech does not have that type of experience. I think Oregon has an advantage. Look, 2.5 points is basically a pick 'em. So I'm going with Oregon here.
Well, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree, Nick. I like Texas Tech here all day long. I think you're right about Oregon being more battle tested. That's definitely the case. But when you look at the body of work, Texas Tech, obviously the Big 12 was weak this year. I'm not going to discredit that. The Big 12 was a weak conference this year. They had two other good teams, I guess you could probably say, in Utah and BYU. But in the games that Texas Tech was presented, where they had a healthy team and played the second best team of their conference twice, they beat them by 20 plus points each time. Texas Tech has a phenomenal defense. Rodriguez and Roberts are two of the best linebackers in the country. I think Dante Moore is going to struggle. It's going to be if Oregon get the run game going, if Whittington can have a big day on the ground, I think Oregon is going to have a legit shot to win this game. But Texas Tech is going to make Dante Moore beat them, and I think that's how the Red Raiders are going to be able to get this job done. So I like Texas Tech to win this game outright. I think their offense is going to do just enough to be able to score when they need to. I think Morton's going to make enough plays at quarterback, and I think Dickey's going to have a decent day on the ground. So yeah, I like Texas Tech in this game, and I think there's going to be a good amount of points scored too. So I'm going over.
All right.
Yeah, I'm just going to go conservative and take the over in this game, just because I think these offenses are going to play really, really well, and I think kind of going off of Will's point, Oregon is going to need Dante Moore almost by himself to try to beat Texas Tech. And I'm not saying that Oregon has a talent gap against Texas Tech, but whenever Dante Moore seems to play at his best, Oregon plays really, really well. As Will alluded to, Texas Tech's defense is really stout, and they've been super underrated all year. I think it's going to be a really good game where whoever has the ball last might win, but something tells me that it's going to be points galore in this game. It could very easily be, I don't know, sort of like a 33-30 game or 30.
Yeah, I agree.
30 game, something like that. It's going to be more than likely one of the best games of this portion of the playoffs. So with that said, I'm going to stay away from picking a team, and I really, really, really like the over 52.5 here. So,
all right. Okay, so the Rose Bowl. Never thought I'd see an Alabama-Indiana Rose Bowl. Right. I can't tell what's more absurd, an Alabama-Indiana Rose Bowl or Indiana being favored by 6.5 points.
I know. That's shocking to me.
Like, imagine if I told you that 2 or 3 years ago, you'd be like, what?
The fact that Vegas thinks that Indiana's a touchdown better than Alabama, that's unreal.
But everybody would agree with that.
I know. Right now, everyone would agree.
So this is I think the most interesting matchup of all. And it's only interesting because of Alabama, because Alabama is such a weird team. So, I think that game against Oklahoma, look, I think Alabama, as I would put it, is like very bipolar. It has multiple personality disorder for a team, is how I would put it, from the way that they play. Indiana, you kind of know what you're going to get. Indiana shows up every game and gives it their all, like they did against Ohio State. And
that just gives it their all, but 95% of the time, They go in and they're looking to they will to go in there, kick the door down, and then eventually destroy the entire property.
Right, which is what they did against what they did in Eugene. It's what they did against Ohio State. Look, the only somewhat close game was against Iowa, and that was
Penn State.
Penn State. Sorry. Penn State was a close game. So they've had a few close calls, and even Iowa was not that close of a call. I mean, they just Mendoza just ran into the end zone. I think that so you kind of know what you're going to get with Indiana in this game. Alabama, I think, is the X factor. That's the interesting piece of the puzzle. Because Alabama, you get multiple different teams usually in the same game. I mean, when you look at what happened with Alabama when you look at how they played against Oklahoma in like the first 10 minutes of that game, they looked like the same team that played against Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Oklahoma completely collapsed. Their punter dropped the ball, which I've never seen before. And then that was the turning point of the game. That was it.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I think that game may have said more about Oklahoma than it did about Alabama.
I think it did.
Because Oklahoma and Alabama are both very strange teams. They're both very difficult to figure out. The thing with Alabama that concerns me is that they're very overly reliant on their pass game, on Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson, I think, does a really good job. Look, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, arguably the best quarterback in the country. And since October, they've been very inconsistent. They've had a few close calls against lousy teams. They played terrible against Georgia. They finally showed a little bit of light against Oklahoma. But, within the past month or so, I think we've seen more of the bad Alabama than the good Alabama. But the thing is that, first of all, we have to consider this. Alabama is playing with house money, much more than they were against Oklahoma. They're really playing with house money. They're not supposed to win this game. They're not under any pressure. And sometimes that's when teams are at their best, when they really don't have much to lose. And I think Alabama is definitely in this situation, playing against Indiana, being the underdogs. The other thing is that if Alabama kind of crosses their T's and dots their I's, they're never really out of the game because they're a very pass-heavy offense. Their biggest problem, honestly, is that they don't run the ball effectively. Alabama's one of those weird teams where in some ways they're better playing from behind than playing ahead because they don't run the ball effectively. They throw the ball down the field a lot, and it's a lot hard. It seems easier for them in some ways to play from behind than playing from ahead and actually holding on to a lead. And I like Alabama here, honestly. I like Alabama to cover this number. I think Alabama will see a similar Alabama team to the team that played against Oklahoma. I think they have a lot of momentum. I don't think they'll win outright, but I think they'll cover this number because look, this Alabama team, they will never be out of it. They're never really out of games. Unless it's a game against Georgia where they just got blown out because they played terribly. But unless you get that version, which they probably won't, they're not going to be out of this game. So I like Alabama here. I think we're going to see a typical Alabama performance, a typical bipolar Alabama performance where we have some stretches where they're terrible, other stretches where they're great, just like against Oklahoma. But I like Alabama to cover this number.
Yeah, this one is a tough one for me because I think both teams are really good, but until Indiana loses, I just can't pick against them. Every single time I feel like that, my doubts about Indiana are going to come true. They somehow, some way seem to show up, and this is the biggest stage they could possibly be on at this point in the year. I think Curt Cignetti knows that this could be another one of his signature wins, and until they lose, I can't pick against him. And I think when you have Fernando Mendoza, who just won the Heisman Trophy, when you have Curt Cignetti, who just 2 years ago the entire college football community was doubting whether he could turn Indiana around, and
nobody even knew who he was.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. I mean, unless you were a real college football junkie, then you did. But nonetheless, as though it's just one of those situations where the stars are aligning. I'm a little biased because I said at the beginning of this that I thought Indiana was going to go to the national championship and rematch Ohio State, so I have to stick to my own prediction here and take Indiana to cover the number. I'm not sure about the over/under in this game. I do think points will be scored. I just think that 48.5 number might be a little tight, and I do think Alabama will play pretty darn well. And I think this is another one of the situations where if you give Ty Simpson or Mendoza 2 minutes and a timeout in the fourth quarter, anything is possible. So give me Indiana to just barely cover the number in the final minutes.
Look, Indiana has a really tough defense. I think that in a weird way, if they play a low scoring game, Indiana will almost certainly win. Like they have I think their chances of them winning is much higher if they play a low scoring game, but it also makes it much harder for them to cover the spread.
Right.
Part of the reason I like Alabama in this game is that, like, if they play Indiana's game, which will be a little bit, Indiana's game would certainly be much more low scoring than if they play Alabama's game. But in that scenario, it's going to be a lot harder for them to cover the spread. Like if the game is like 13-10 or something like that, Indiana probably wins.
Right.
Or if it looks anything like the game against Ohio State. But yeah, go ahead, Will.
Yeah. I'll tell you guys what. If Alabama gets up to the start they got out against on the road at Oklahoma, Indiana is off to the semifinals in a very easy game. I will say this too. Indiana is not going to make mistakes. Indiana is not going to make mistakes like Oklahoma did. Indiana's punter is not going to drop the football.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. John Mateer or Fernando Mendoza is probably not going to throw interceptions like John Mateer did in that game. Like the pick six that happened against Oklahoma, that's not going to happen in this game. It's not. So I'm kind of with Zain here. I mean, like until Indiana stopped, it's like it's hard to pick against them because like
you just can't.
I think that so many people are thinking like, oh, it's Alabama. I mean, they're favored. They're plus 6.5 against Indiana. It's a no-brainer. But like, if you actually follow college football, Indiana has been not only dominant on offense, they've been dominant on defense, and they don't make mistakes on special teams either. Like,
no, they don't.
Indiana plays perfect in all facets of the game. And that's why they're 13-0 right now. And that's why they're number one in the country. I just don't see, like, I really just don't see how Alabama's going to win this game. I just don't, because Indiana is a power program right now. I mean, like, they're number one for a reason. So I think Alabama's going to give them a game, but I think I tend to agree with Zain saying, like, Indiana might be like a 24-20 type of situation. Indiana kicks a late field goal and gets a stop in the final drive of the game or something like that. So I do think Indiana does cover this number, and I think the under slightly hits.
I don't think that I don't think Alabama's going to win outright. I just think they're going to cover the number.
No, I could see it.
And I mean, I will say, I don't think a lot of people are saying that, like, oh, Alabama's getting 6.5. I don't really think people are saying, like, you would have to really not follow college football this year at all to not know that Indiana.
I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who bet who don't. They just think
that's
like
true.
But I don't know. Alabama's plus 260 on the money line. Look at that name.
Yeah, I guess maybe, but I don't think it's enough people that it's necessarily going to affect the line that much. But
no, I'm just saying. I mean, like,
Alabama is just
like, I don't know, but
yeah, Alabama is just sort of a weird team. They're very weird team. The only team weirder than them this year is Oklahoma. Like, Oklahoma is one of those weird teams where they have a really good defense, but also can't run the ball at all.
No,
they're just
run the ball,
and their quarterback they're very overly reliant on their quarterback, and sometimes he throws too many interceptions. It's a similar type of thing with Alabama, except because they don't run the ball effectively, and their defense is not great. Their quarterback is one of the best in the country, and that's the only reason that they're as good as they are.
Yep. Exactly. I agree.
But yeah, it's just going to be an interesting game because, like, I don't know which Alabama team's going to show up, and I don't know when they're going to show up. And that's just part of the reason I like Alabama, because you just never know with this team.
Don't.
All right, and guess what? Ty Simpson could have a better stat line than Mendoza. He very well could, and honestly might. but that probably won't matter in this game. It probably won't.
Well, the thing with Mendoza is that, like, I think Josh Pate talked about this. He was talking about the Heisman and how, like, Pavia was initially the favorite to win the Heisman. And then Mendoza won the Big Ten championship, and then this odds went drastically in his favor. And if you look at his stat line, it's like he just played a typical Mendoza game. Like that, he played as well as was expected. It's not like he had for like 400 yards or anything like that. And that somehow like flipped the Heisman on its head. Like it doesn't even really make much sense.
Yeah.
Sugar Bowl. Ole Miss versus Georgia. Georgia's giving 6.5. I don't think that number has changed. As far as my problem is I can't find my phone, so I'm looking online. Right, I'm on my laptop looking at the odds. Yep, 6.5. 50 over under is 55.5. Yep, nothing's changed. This is an interesting game because it's a little hard to evaluate Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin.
It is.
It's a rematch. It's a little hard to evaluate. Ole Miss is the hard team. Like I said with Alabama, Ole Miss is the tougher team to evaluate in this matchup.
I would say, honestly, at the moment, they're the outlier in this whole thing because you just simply don't know. That's like a huge question mark.
Because they destroyed Tulane by 30 points.
Which they were supposed to, and they did.
Well, no, they were supposed to win by 17.5 because like they blew out the spread that game.
Yeah.
They did better than was expected, but that's because Tulane that game probably said more about Tulane than it did about Ole Miss because Tulane probably had no business being there.
Right. I just more so meant that in a general sense, but
yes, they were supposed to. And Lane Kiffin not being there, I think matters a whole lot because he's a very good play caller. However, I think it might be overstated a little because the entire team that he put together is still there. I mean, it matters that he's not there, but they're not that much worse without him. Because, the whole Lane Kiffin, it's still Lane Kiffin's team, even if he's not physically there. So another thing you have to consider is we don't really know, like Georgia, we all kind of have mixed feelings about them. Because, look, Georgia is a very good team. But we also kind of feel like they've taken a step back in these past couple of years. Georgia from a couple of years, a Georgia team from 2 or 3 years ago would probably beat this Georgia team for sure. So we don't really know. So we don't, and they've had a few rough patches this year. I mean, look, they beat Georgia Tech, but they didn't play a good game. They lost to Alabama. We don't really know totally how to feel about Georgia. The thing with Ole Miss is that it's a little hard to evaluate them because in the first time that they played, that was Trinidad Chambliss's first SEC road game.
Yep, it sure was.
So it's a little tough to be like, well, they beat them already. I mean, look, that's tough for young quarterbacks. So here, I actually like Ole Miss to cover this number against Georgia. It's a little similar to how I feel about Alabama. They're kind of outliers in a weird way. Like they're tough to evaluate, but I think Ole Miss is going to put up a lot of points. And I also like the over here. I think these games with like Georgia's a defensive team primarily, but a lot of these games tend to be shootouts. With Georgia, they do get into a lot of shootouts. They got a shootout against Ole Miss the first time. They got into a shootout against Tennessee. I think Ole Miss will keep this close. And sometimes Georgia has a tough time pulling away in these games. I think Ole Miss will have a slightly better performance than they did the first time playing Georgia on the road, and this time at a neutral site. I like Ole Miss here to cover the number, and I like the over.
Yeah, Nick, I'm going to agree with you on both these things here. I like Ole Miss plus that 6.5, and I also like the over. There's no reason to think that it shouldn't be another shootout. I mean, it was the first time we played. There's no reason to think it won't be again. And here's the thing, too. Ole Miss led that game. They were beating Georgia in the fourth quarter. They were winning that game in Athens in the fourth quarter. Now, look, obviously not having Lane Kiffin could be a big hurdle to get over in this type of game now. But here's the thing. They've played Georgia. They know what their team is like. It's going to be interesting to see how Georgia looks after that dominant performance in the SEC championship, which I think says more about Alabama than Georgia. But it said a decent amount about both sides, but it kind of showed like Alabama's flaws in a sense that game too. Georgia looked great in that game. Don't discredit that. They looked fantastic in that game. But here's the thing: Ole Miss, like they came into, I think they came into this playoff with a chip on their shoulder, and I think that's only going to roll over into this game. I wouldn't be shocked if they win. I really wouldn't be. I wouldn't be shocked if they win this game either. Do I think they will? No, I do think Georgia will win, but I think that Ole Miss is going to give them one hell of a ball game. Like I could see it being like 33-30, something like that, 34-30, right around that mark. That Georgia, it might even be a similar situation to the last time where Ole Miss had a fourth quarter lead and Georgia came back again. But yeah, I expect a shootout. I think Ole Miss is going to give Georgia everything it can handle in New Orleans.
See, I'm going to disagree with both of you guys for one simple reason. Which coach do I trust more? Do I trust a coach with tons and tons of experience, or do I trust a coach who's been thrust into a situation because of a previous coach's prior decisions? My simple answer to this is I trust Kirby Smart a lot more than I do Golding, and I think that this rematch is going to go a lot differently than the one a couple months ago in Athens. I think that this is Georgia's game to lose. I think this number is exactly where it needs to be. And unless Chambliss is the game of his career, I just simply don't see how it's close. So give me Georgia to cover the number. And I think the over-under is just a suspect for me for two teams where I don't fully know where they are given the way as time these two teams played earlier this fall. And Will, I'm going to actually have to disagree with you here. I think Georgia's SEC championship game showed a lot more about how good Georgia is and how good Georgia could be moving forward, which is why I really like them. So give me Georgia to, at the very least, cover the number in New Orleans.
Well, let me push back for a second, because you could have said that in a lot of the games that Georgia played. You could have said that with Kirby Smart against Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart against Billy Napier. I know he won that game, but they didn't cover the spread. That was a close game. So, you could have said that about Kirby. Like, I would take Kirby Smart over any other active coach right now.
But they're winning, though. That's the point. And they're doing so in a way that may not be 100% clean, but they're still winning, though. At least from what the metrics tell you. And when it comes to the spread, they can be a little inconsistent, but I think this number is right where it needs to be. Is my overall point.
Well, that's the point I'm making, though, which is that, like, because they're not winning clean, I expect Georgia to win the game, but I don't expect them to cover the spread, is the point I'm making. And another thing is, like, I think Ole Miss is also, like Alabama, they're kind of playing with house money. They don't have much to lose. Georgia is under a lot more pressure in this game. And just for the record, not that it really means anything, because it really doesn't, but Georgia is not good against the spread. They are 6-7 against the spread. Ole Miss is much better against the spread. They are 8-5 against the spread this season, which is not drastically different, but Georgia hasn't really been very good against the spread. Can you guys guess who the best SEC team against the spread has been this year?
Florida.
No.
They're
not good against the spread.
Let's see. I will go with. This is tough. I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna say Alabama, but I think I'm gonna go. With Texas.
No.
Really?
Texas
Okay.
is one of the worst against the spread.
Okay.
It's Vanderbilt.
That makes sense. That actually does make sense.
They're 82% cover.
That does make sense.
That's how good. Alabama is also not far off. They're 9-4-1.
Okay.
Again,
makes sense.
Georgia, though, they're only 6-7. They are not a great team against the spread. I
think Florida is more of a joke just because like they've covered some games they probably shouldn't. That's only why I said that.
No, it's not crazy because there are some games where they cover. I mean, look, they beat Texas. They came close to beating Georgia, but there were some games where they just got blown out.
Oh yeah, no, for For
where
sure.
they just got blown out. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. That's our show this week. We're not picking any of the other bowl games. We don't have time. It's all right. We got to the playoff games. That's the most important.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.